Next up, I would like to invite Dr. David Vago to talk about his experiences. He's an integrative medicine specialist, and also he's a meditator himself. So he has a great combinations and is also a neurosciences researcher. David.
Grateful to be sharing time and space with you, Sadhguru, and Dr. Darswami, Dr. Bala, Dr. Aparetti, and all of you that are really listening. This is really an unprecedented moment, really, in history, right? That we're in this global pandemic. And as Dr. Bala and Dr. Darswami have already alluded to, that we're having the effect here is that there's a profound negative psychological and social impact that will likely persist for months and years to come. So we're all really looking for solutions. We're faced with social isolation, which, as we all know, as humans, is horrible for us. Economic hardship and pandemic fatigue. This is a phenomenon where people are tired of taking precautions. So our future is really uncertain every day, and the decisions that we have to make based on uncertainty only contributes to more anxiety. So the question really is, what can science and contemplative wisdom do for us to help us? My research focuses a lot on how we understand the self from a psychosocial and cognitive neurobiological perspective, and how contemplative practices like yoga and meditation can change our neurobiology, supporting adaptive health outcomes. We really want to understand how prolonged stress, especially stressors that are on top of our everyday stress. Being in pandemic is not normal. So there's added stresses, right? So to the normal stresses in our everyday life that we're perceiving as stress, as Dr. Bala is showing, perceived stress is one of the outcomes that we really focus on. And what my research is showing is that perception really matters. And what one chooses to allow, as you suggested, Sadhguru, what we choose to allow into our own mind here or here, wherever it may reside, can influence how our whole body responds to these life challenges. And perception at every moment can make a difference. And Sadhguru, it's really wonderful to hear how you simplify the problem by saying people are invested in their misery. I think that's a really great way to articulate what we do with our mind and how we use our mind to produce suffering. And our problem, as you say, is that we've not learned how to handle that, handle our intelligence, our capacity to actually move beyond some of the suffering that we create for ourselves. And you also have mentioned previously that our incapabilities have become our problems. So I wanted to just take this opportunity to maybe provide a framework to explain the time scale by which our perception influences the construction of ourselves, our experience of the world, and our health outcomes and longevity. And I will just say as a caveat that there is good news that there is a systematic form of mental training involving meditation and yoga, not just the physical postures on the mat, like you suggest also, is that there's a way of being in the world that relates not only to what you do on the mat, but what you do off the mat, that can transform ourselves and our mental habits in a positive way. So I think that the science, I will say, is the current research is in alignment with some of the greatest contemplative and wisdom-based traditions. For example, you often quote the Dhammapada, which is some of the best-known collections of teachings by the Buddha, that describes our life is shaped by our mind, for we become what we think. And that statement really summarizes what I'm going to now just describe in terms of the neurobiology and the sort of the what I call the temporal chronometry. The way that time unfolds in your brain and body when you perceive something every moment. And the basic idea here is that from birth to the present day, our subjective experience of being someone, our wants, our fears, our values, our expectations, our whole self-identity is continuously constructed through a string of moment-to-moment processing of selfing, of being a self in the world. And that each moment can be broken down into processes of perception, sensory awareness, and cognitive evaluation, all of which happen on a time scale of 500 milliseconds, or half a second. And you can think about what that really means, is that we blink every 250 milliseconds. Every blink, right? So almost 2 blinks of an eye is a moment in which what you've perceived in the world is actually creating plasticity in your brain to reify yourself and your mental habits. And it can move in a trajectory of maladaptive selfing or adaptive selfing. So we have, I'll just briefly say, we have 86 billion neurons in our brain. We're born with 86 billion neurons. And we pretty much die with about the same number of neurons. It's really the cell-to-cell synaptic connections that are made in response to our everyday experiences that construct ourself, that help provide the patterns by which we identify with and the way we perceive and experience the world. So let's just unpack this 500 millisecond moment, right? You know, this string of 500 millisecond moments sustains a cycle of mental habits and dispositions that are self-conditioning, self-perpetuating through repetition. And again, it reifies our conception of self, coloring our memory for the past or the imagined future. And based on this idea, we can say that you, Sadhguru, for example, have had over 3 billion moments to become who is speaking with us today. Think of the billions of moments that you have had every 500 milliseconds since from birth to right now. Have really.
You calculated that number for me?
I did. It's about that. 3 billion. It's about.
So when people ask me my age, I will say 3 billion milliseconds.
3 billion moments. Well, it's 3 billion times 500 milliseconds.
Okay.
So 1.5 billion seconds, maybe. But just like your physical self, your mental self is not a static entity. It's constantly changing. And what I want to emphasize is that whatever thought or emotion that makes up the content of our mind every moment may have a negative consequence for our health or well-being or a positive one. So all these catastrophic types of ways of thinking, feelings of helplessness, there's nothing I can do to improve the situation, I have no control, or magnifying the situation where it's so terrible, it's never going to get better, I feel overwhelmed, and the ruminations that continue. And the rumination is a very key construct here, because what it is the constant negative thoughts that repeat themselves over and over again. So if you're putting those thoughts of, I feel terrible, it's never going to get better, I'm overwhelmed, I'm worried this pandemic will never end, and I can't keep these worries out of my mind, you're feeding the reification of yourself as the worried self. The worried Dave is now being constructed every moment, every thought that I put in there. So anger, fear, any sort of destructive emotion is only destructive because they happen so frequently, and they may put the people around you, including yourself, at risk for injury, or they interfere with your social functioning. But we know, the science shows that these dispositions of destructive types of emotions, there's the most extensive scientific evidence that these are risk factors for depression, anxiety, cardiovascular disease, and even shows to speed up the rate of cellular aging at the level of your DNA. You know, it increases the risk of dying prematurely of a heart attack. So really, what we think and feel every moment has that kind of capacity to influence how whether we will be adaptive or have positive health outcomes or negative ones. So I'm not going to speak at length here, but I will say that the data from integrative mind and body practices like meditation and yoga are starting to show very positive outcomes, to show that a systematic form of training to allow us to, I think, Dr. Doraiswamy, you also said this, instead of reacting to the things that happen in our experience, responding in a way where we are doing it with some awareness, with some intelligence we're actually using our intelligence for good, where we don't just react and go with the mental habits that have been destructive in the past, but allow us to get unstuck and not, entrenched in some destructive mental pattern, and to move beyond that kind of distorted way of seeing the world. This will allow us to move into a more adaptive type of behavior pattern. And we're now seeing that these biases that we all have, whether they are biases in how we avoid negative things that are happening around us, or whether we have racial biases, they're all informing our present moment awareness and how we see the world in front of us and how we see others. And what we're seeing in our own data from people who practice meditation and yoga is that these biases at the 200 millisecond level, this is below conscious awareness, is changing. And that suggests, and that correlates with the positive health outcomes like perceived stress or well-being, or other health outcomes like pain interference. We're showing that those biases that are changing as a result of these meditation practices are a direct result of the intervention itself, meaning the more you practice the meditations, the less bias you have, and the more adaptive your mental habits become. So I have two kind of broad questions for you based on the comments you've made, Sadhguru. You often refer to a universal non-dualistic consciousness that is common across the majority of spiritual and contemplative traditions. This is an experience that has the potential to alleviate all suffering, dissolve all the illusory boundaries between self and others, and unify all sentient beings through compassionate, calm awareness. And I wanted to ask, and I do believe in this as a practitioner and as a scientist. I just wanted to see if you could respond by saying how accessible or even relevant is this profound experience of non-duality, of this consciousness that you speak of. During an unprecedented global pandemic that's having profoundly negative psychological and social impact that may persist for months or years to come. And I have a second part. I don't know if you want to take two parts or I'll if you can hold that in mind. If it is indeed accessible, this universal consciousness, and even in times of this added stresses, having not enough money to pay our rent, put food on the table, provide safety for our family, can people expect to benefit directly from the prescribed yoga and other meditation practices and tools being offered through virtual programs, because everything is moving virtually, right? So again, Dr. Doraiswamy and Dr. Bala have talked about some of the work that they're doing that is virtual. But can these virtual programs capture the value added through direct experience of a teacher, the sacred space of what you have in a temple, or the practice in the context of a community? And I'll just mute myself to hear your response.
Thank you for recognizing my intellectual disability, whether I can hold two questions in my mind or not. I thought I will leave it to Dr. Appa Reddy, but you took it up.
You don't give yourself enough credit.
That's okay. So, see, do not look at this as a doctrine. It's not a doctrine of Advaita. It is not a doctrine of universality. As a doctor, you know today that you have more microbes, bacteria and viruses and other microorganisms in this body than the cells, human cells that you have. This is a fact. So right now this virus, somehow it is not against us, this is what we need to understand. The virus is just looking for new habitat because We have taken out, in the last 50 years, about 80% of the vertebrate population on the planet has come down, 80%. So the virus that was living happily in a pangolin or a bat, don't have enough pangolins all eaten up by somebody, don't have enough bats to fly. So they're looking for new habitat. Like, 200, 250 years ago, people who were looking for new habitat came to America, all right? They thought it's a new world. So all you found was a new habitat, isn't it? From where you were, you came, starting with Columbus, millions of people came here looking for a new habitat. I'm sure in the beginning, those people who came on the Mayflower and those initial pioneers who came, if 100 people landed, 50 people died, most probably. Just the conditions and the difference and whatever else was happening here. I don't know what's the percentage, but I assume at least 50 would have died young. They wouldn't have lived a full life because a new habitat. So, right now the virus has been just looking for a new habitat. It's not from Mars, it's been on this planet for always, but it was living within certain limited habitats happily, but as the habitats started shrinking, maybe they want to find a new habitat. Do you want to destroy the habitat in which you live? Only human beings wish to do that. No other creature on the planet wants to destroy what is the source of their life. So in many ways now human beings have become the source for this virus, the new virus that's come to us. Only thing is they live so vigorously that we experience it as virulence. They're just trying to live, but we are not able to withstand their vigorous nature of existence, our body is collapsing. That also we know now that if your immune systems are good, people are going through without any symptoms and they are fine. And there are various other things people are talking. Anyway, in another 1 or 2 years, it'll be with all of us and we will all manage to live, or some will die, so most of us will live with the virus. Or virus will learn to live with us. It understands this is a fragile habitat, I need to live little carefully. Like we are beginning to understand now after so many years of existence with the planet, if we go on living like this, planet will get destroyed, our habitat will go. So similarly, probably they will realize in their own way. So at a time like this, about psychological problems, what this means is, whenever there is an external challenge, whenever there is an external challenge in our life, that is a time that in body, mind, in every other way, your intelligence, your faculties, everything should function at its best. But a whole lot of human beings have chosen this path. Whenever there is a challenge outside, they become a big challenge by themselves. Whenever there is a problem outside, they will become a bigger problem within themselves. See, this may sound very, not compassionate. Yes, I am not here to show compassion, because I'm interested in solution, not solace. What do you do with solace? With solace, you continue with the problem, thinking it's okay. No, problem must go. What we need for a problem is a solution, not solace. So I am not a solace peddling person. No, don't worry, everything will be okay, God will take care of you. Well, you may go there to him very quickly. If that is your intent, no problem at all, what's the problem with the virus? If you are so certain that you are going to heaven and it's a great place, what is the problem with the virus, I'm saying? So I'm saying we have so many lies packed up in our head, we are not willing to face our life as it is. The fact of the matter is, life is the most precious thing we have. There's no question. Whether it's for me or for the microbe, for both of us, the most precious thing that we have is we're alive right now. So we value that. But the moment you think there is a better place somewhere, you naturally want to go there quickly before me, isn't it? Hello? If there is really a better place somewhere else, You want to go there first ahead of me before I go and occupy the best accommodation or not? Definitely you want to go, but nobody wants to go. So I'm saying we need to stop this. We need to stop this means how we handle our identities, we must look at it. You were talking about biases and prejudices that human beings have. What is the basis of this? The basis of this is just this. See, there are… if you will give me a few minutes, is it okay, Bala?
Yes, sir.
Because time-wise, I mean, we've still not allowed Madam to speak at all, yeah, because this will take a few minutes. We look at human mind, the yogic system looks at human mind as 16 parts. To make it simple, we will look at it as 4 segments. These are called buddhi, ahankara, manas and chitta. What this means is, buddhi means the intellect. Right now, modern societies think this is the only thing that matters. Your intellect is useful only if you have a certain amount of data. Without memory, your intellect is useless. Absolutely, am I right? Because you're all into neurosciences, I'm asking you. If there is no data somewhere, your intellect is useless. This is just like you bought a new computer or a new phone, no data in it. No data, this is as good as a brick. It's no use. So the same goes for our intellect. Without data, our intellect is useless. Data is useful. How actively and how effectively you process your data in the schoolroom, you will get identified either you're smart or stupid, all right? So essentially, how much data you can hold is generally considered first rank. If you can hold lot of data and you can put it out on the paper out there, then they say, you're the smartest boy or girl here. But today we know a tape recorder or a microchip can hold more data than your entire brain can do. There is so much memory you can store in an inanimate object. So is it smarter than you? I think it is, because these days we call phones as smartphones. Why would you call an instrument smart? Because it's smarter than you, obviously. Our idea of smart is somebody who's smarter than us, isn't it? So a phone is smarter than us simply because it holds more GB than you hold, that's all it is. So without data, your intellect cannot function. So how does data come into you? And where does data get stored? Well, here we are looking at memory. There are 8 different dimensions of memory. There is elemental memory, there is atomic memory, there is evolutionary memory, there is genetic memory, there is karmic memory, there is subconscious, unconscious or articulate, inarticulate and conscious memories. There are some dimensions of memory that you can articulate in the way you live, not necessarily in the words. In so many ways, see, your genetic memory you have, some part of it is articulate, certain parts of it is inarticulate. Like this, every dimension of memory you have, certain parts are articulate, certain parts are inarticulate. That does not mean they don't have any impact on you. The very way you sit and stand is determined by this. How my skin is today is simply the way it just remembers. The epithelial cells in my body remembers million years ago how my forefathers' skin was. Nothing has been forgotten here. So there's an enormous amount of memory in every molecule of DNA or every cell in the body, enormous. Now, all this thing is being processed at some level. Is it happening in the brain? No, it is happening right across the body, which has set up a massive chemical factory. The most sophisticated and the largest chemical factory on the planet is right here. The question is, are you a great manager of this chemical factory or are you a lousy manager? That's all it is. For me, that is all health and ill health is. If you manage this well, you're healthy. If you don't manage this well, you're ill. Why it went wrong? Well, there are many reasons. Even if you're managing a business, why it went wrong is not always because you did something dastardly, all right? It could be because of various reasons. Right now, the virus It's like for your business, the situation outside has changed. For your chemical factory, the outside situation has changed. The contact and the transactions that you had, which was taking care of not only your economic activity and social activity, it was also transacting various things that are needed for you in the form of food, in the form of microbes, in the form of various other things that were happening with the system, is a little curtailed. Not absolutely curtailed, all right? If the people are saying, when we shake hands, we were getting so much microbes and things, life was happening, you have to just put your hand in the earth, you will get all the microbes you want, you can go and hug a tree, you can get all the microbes you want, you don't have to go and shake hands with somebody or hug or kiss somebody else to get these microbes. You can get it in so many ways, it's all over the place. So leaving that aside, the next part of the intelligence is called ahankara. Ahankara means identity. This is one area of life that we have completely neglected in the modern societies. Identity means, if you form an identity, let's say right now, like you're a man or you're a woman, this is an identity. The moment you think I'm a man, you think in a certain way, you feel in a certain way and you have a certain prejudice. Every identity is a certain form of prejudice. I'm an Indian, I'm an American, I'm black, I'm white, I'm brown. Every identity or religious identities, whatever, every identity is a certain form of prejudice. It is just that when you're in a certain group of people, you don't realize you're prejudiced. When you enter other spaces, you realize you're prejudiced or other people recognize you're prejudiced. See, the worst kind of racist does not believe he's prejudiced because he's very nice to his own kind, all right? He does not realize he's prejudiced. It's only other people who are saying he's prejudiced, because within that little identity what he has, he is quite fine. So whether it is racial, religious, national, gender or family, education, class, creed, all kinds of things, caste, whatever kinds of identities. So in India we did one thing, in the yogic culture we did one thing. Before you start education for a child, because we believed from 0 to 12 years of age, nothing should be taught to a child. A child should grow up physiologically, his body and his brain must grow to its full capability. Only after that you give data to the child. Till then, he must just play, eat, sleep, this all he must do. So at 11 or 12 years of age when this happened, the first thing we did was, before education comes, because education is seen as a tremendous empowerment, this empowerment with limited identity is a disaster. See, right now, we know how to fuse atoms, we know how to make a nuclear bomb. Well, this bomb in a controlled way is energy for the world. In an uncontrolled way, it's destruction. Why would I put the bomb on you? Because I'm not identified with you, you are something else, all right? I am this country, you are that country, I will bomb you. Or I am this religion, you are that religion, I will bomb you. I am this race and you are that race and I will bomb you. This is all it is. It is the identity. So this identity we fixed at an early age, before education comes, because education was considered as the greatest empowerment that a human being has, and education was absolutely holistic. Because of that, first thing is to change the identity. The child was made to take a cosmic identity, aham brahmasmi. That means my identity with the whole creation. Without this step, there was no education. This is the way to go forward. We must understand this. Every evil that you see on this planet, whether it's crime or war or every other kind of prejudice and violence that you see, is essentially a consequence of limited identity, isn't it so? If I saw you as mine, I wouldn't be harming you. I think these three people are mine, those three people are not mine. This is the whole thing, because in various ways, starting with family, from there in so many different ways, various silos of identities we have. So the most important thing is to create a universal identity. Even if it's not a living experience for you as yet, You set up a universal identity which sets the basis to take you towards that experience which you are referring to as like a doctrine. It's not a doctrine, it's an inner experience. The next dimension of mind is called as manas. This is a whole silo of memory. As I said, 8 dimensions of memory are there, from elemental to the conscious memory. Every kind of things that have happened on this planet, even in the form of evolution, in the form of creation, in some way is there within you. It may not be articulate, but it exists. Life has captured the memory of everything that's happened on this planet. That is the basis of your evolution, that is the basis of your intelligence, that is the basis of the variety of faculties that you have. Suppose as an experiment, because you guys are always doing experiments, suppose you get 10 men or women and feed them, let us say, dog food. Do you believe in 3 months they will become like dogs? No such thing will happen, because there is evolutionary memory here. No matter what you do, this memory is not going to go away. Because it's not articulate, you cannot interfere with it, it's solidly there within you. It can't be taken away from you, it cannot be altered. So you cannot go back. You may behave like one for some time, but you cannot become that simply because the evolutionary memory is solidly installed in you. So this manas, which is the silo of memory, and the ahankara and the intellect are connected. Without these 3 things, the reason why human intellect has become so destructive, when I say destructive, it is only because of empowered intellect in the form of education. Please tell me, on this planet, are educated people destroying this planet or illiterate people destroying this planet? We are today admiring illiterate people as very low carbon footprint, isn't it? It's only the educated which are destroying. Education should have been the solution. Unfortunately, it is the basis of every problem, simply because our identity has not been settled. We don't have a universal identity, we have a limited identity. As I said earlier, I will stress on this once again, every prejudice, every bias, every crime, every war is a consequence of limited identity. All the negative things we are doing are essentially limited identity. Me versus rest of the world, actually, this is what most human beings are. Initially they think my nation versus your nation, my race versus your race, but if you really boil them down, you will see me versus rest of the universe. Me versus universe is a bad competition to get into. Once you get into this mode, you being stressed and anxious is natural. You must be stressed, otherwise I will be disappointed. What is the point of me doing lifetimes of yoga to become like this if you do nothing and you're also like that? No. You must understand, well-being has to be worked at, it doesn't just happen, all right? It doesn't just happen. So the 4th dimension of our intelligence is very, very important. This is called as chitta. What chitta means is, it's a dimension of intelligence which is unsullied by memory. The first 3 dimensions, the power of that is in the memory. But memory is a great possibility. We are who we are. We are talking to each other, we know a language, we can communicate, we can do so many things. We are individual people only because of our memory. But memory is such a tremendous possibility, at the same time, memory is also a boundary, isn't it? You are my friend, how? Because you are in my memory. I look at somebody else, oh, he's a stranger, how did he become a stranger? He's not in my memory. So memory is also a boundary. So most people never hit the limits of their boundary. This is the reason the longing to go beyond that does not come. Only when you touch the limits of your boundaries, that is when the longing to transcend will come. And transcendence is the only way to transform, there is simply no other way. So chitta is that dimension of intelligence within you which is untouched by any kind of memory. In many ways, it's the source of creation within you. Because if you eat a piece of bread, it is becoming human flesh and blood. How does this happen? There is an intelligence which is capable of transforming a piece of bread into a human being right there, isn't it? So, chitta is that dimension. When people touch chitta, then they spoke certain things which unfortunately, people who don't have a living experience of that made doctrines and dogmas out of that. And that also there are many opposing doctrines and dogmas. When there is no memory, there is no conflict, isn't it? Suppose you don't remember a thing and I don't remember a thing, can we fight, I'm asking? No any kind of memory, we cannot even exist. So in a way, Advaita as a doctrine means that you don't actually exist as an individual. So don't approach this as a doctrine because it will be a very negative impact on life. Then people will start saying everything is Maya, don't worry, nothing will happen, nothing is real, virus is not real right now, a whole lot of people are arguing, life itself is not real, they're arguing. Well, they're arguing, that means they're alive. But they're denying that because they got Advaita as a doctrine, not as an inner experience. See, what is an inner experience and what is a concept are two different things. So do not conceptualize deeper dimensions of life, because the moment you conceptualize, your conceptualization comes from your intellect. Your intellect functions only with limited memory. That limited memory can never, ever grasp that which is beyond memory. So chitta, in the yogic culture, in a very mischievous way, the yogis speak among themselves like this: if you touch your chitta, if you find access to your chitta, God will become your slave. That may sound very arrogant, but they're not wrong. What they're saying is the source of creation is, you can play with it. Once you can play with the source of creation, how you are is entirely determined by you. Your very persona is carefully crafted, you can be 100% yourself, but at the same time, you clearly know the boundaries are consciously set up for function. Once there is no need for function, you can just dismantle the whole boundary. So, this idea of Advaita is a bad idea, but the experience of Advaita is the ultimate liberation. This differentiation has to be there, otherwise, what is an ultimate experience which is beyond all memory, if you memorize that, that is going to be very negative, and this is one reason philosophies have made people negative. Philosophies have made people fatalistic. Philosophies have in many ways have crippled humanity simply because they assume something which is not at their experience. You can only… you can only take the next step from where you are. If you assume something else which is not in your experience, then you will become hallucinatory. So, I'm sorry if I've said too much.
Thank you, Sadhguru.
Thank you, Sadhguru.
Thank you, Dave.